Wilson. I have the pleasure of introducing Miss Ashley Pipkin. She works for the Natural Sounds and Night Skies Division of the National Park Service. She works closely with the parks throughout the country to protect and better understand the night resource and share its incredible value with their public. Most recently, she's been contributing time to the development of the Basin and Range Dark Sky Cooperative. The BRDSC is a multi-state effort aimed at restoring the night sky and sharing resources with interested participants that show the benefits of protecting the natural night skies that connect us. So, Ashley, please take it away.
Hello, everyone, and thank you for that introduction. I appreciate it. Let me get my screen shared, and I will jump into a presentation that I'm planning to give today. So like you heard from Dennis, I work for the National Park Service. I'm a biologist by training, and I've been working for the Natural Sounds and Night Skies Division for about 9 years now. I'm going to talk to you a little bit about my background and what I've been involved with most recently, and how these kind of night sky opportunities are helping tourism and astrotourism specifically in some places across the United States and across the world that might be of interest. Okay. So for the National Park Service, I've been with the organization for well over a decade, in this division for almost 10 years. And, we care about the night sky. It's our mission to protect this resource in a national park. And that resource that is so important is the night sky and these amazing views of the stars and the Milky Way above. These values help inspire people and help protect habitat. So really why I'm here with you today is to kind of share this incredible experience with you and share this opportunity that the National Park Service provides in, providing absolute amazement when you're sitting under a beautiful and pristine night sky, and hear about your experiences in those places as well. One of the main functions and one of the things that people often think about when they think about the National Park Service is how we often, put a boundary around a place, protect habitat for wildlife that lives within it. And that's especially true for these like large land parks like Big Bend. This is what we have pictured here. And this place looks relatively free from development and buildings. You might be able to notice this little area in the bottom left-hand side of the corner, but it looks like a relatively untouched, relatively pristine landscape without a lot of modern amenities. But if you go to the same landscape at night, you can really see how human development is really impacting the environment here. So you can see some bright lights basically shining on the mountains above. And we realized that protecting these habitats, protecting these places had to include protecting nocturnal habitats and nighttime as well. So we started considering how our lights were impacting these places. So we started doing that. This was in 2011. We did this first retrofit in Big Bend National Park. And you can see here how there's a big difference in how these lights are shining on the mountains behind these places. And then no longer shining in those places anymore. So, many parks interpret the night sky and have night sky programs with night sky rangers and telescopes to help visitors kind of see some of the stars that they may not really have familiarity with in their own backyards. But there are places outside the National Park Service that there are incredible night skies and that can also be doing this work and sharing these experiences. And that's really why I'm here today, to talk about some of those other places and some of those other opportunities as well. So I'll just give a little bit of background. Since I'm a biologist, I have to share some of this information since it's especially something that I'm passionate about. But, you know, in addition to this visitor experience parks provide, we have this responsibility to protect ecosystems. And so protecting the night sky means protecting these habitats. It's important because 62% of all species are really most active at nighttime. And nocturnal wildlife, like much of the wildlife pictured here, differs from humans in that they stay up all night and they sleep all day. And we humans, on the other hand, are awake for most of the day and typically go to sleep at nighttime. But nocturnal wildlife have really relied on these naturally dark conditions and subtle light cues of the moon and the Milky Way to interact with their environment. So all species are impacted by this loss of natural nighttime, but nocturnal species are the most severely impacted by light pollution. So protecting these places means protecting the nighttime. While pollutants in the air and water have impacted all living things on the planet, humans who are asleep at night have mostly ignored, or at least not taken artificial light at night as a serious pollutant because we have not realized how it impacts the natural world. The lights on my street that shine into my window at night can be mitigated by drawing the shades, but our wildlife really does not have this luxury. And I'll share a few of the most common examples that we know. So for many animals, light serves as a beacon to guide them. One of the most popular examples is nesting sea turtles. They used to use the moonlight on the ocean to guide them home after they hatch, but now the brightest point that they see are oceanfront properties. And so they can be led in the wrong direction that could be fatal for them. So I'm in the Mojave Desert, and near my home, the yucca moth that's here is the only pollinator of a Joshua tree. So it's the only one who pollinates the Joshua tree when it's flowering. And the Joshua tree has beautiful white flowers that used to reflect moonlight at nighttime. But this is a picture, you know, I took nearby my local dump. This is the full moon, and you can see the brightest lights on the landscape are no longer this full moon. They're the four or five lights from my local dump. So light pollution impacts all animals from fish to birds, insects, and plants. But I really want to spend more of my time today just talking about some different examples and talk about the deep human connection with the night sky. There are deeply spiritual places like Chaco culture that have a connection with the people who live there and still live there and share their stories today. And when humans degrade the night sky, some of those connections and stories tied to these amazing places are also degraded. We lose our vision of the night sky. The Pueblo structures at Chaco are interpreted during the day, but also at night, and the sky and objects and stories connect people really from across the planet. And that's what I really love about the night sky. You know, for example, the same time that the Greeks looked at the constellation that Western science still identifies today as Ursa Major, they saw a bear, and so did the Iroquois Nation. And this is just a reminder about how the stars connect us all under one beautiful blanket of, you know, celestial magnificence. It's beautiful if you've seen this. And regardless of what people saw, they saw story in the night sky, and there are no people more qualified to tell the American Native stories of the night sky than tribes are. Of course, the main issue here is caused by light pollution, and that's introduced into our landscapes in a few forms. So light pollution in the form of sky glow, like in this image. You can see that sky glow here is kind of drowning out the stars in this half of the image. You can still see the stars up here, but it's harder to see the stars closer to the sky. But sky glow can also come in the form of just a bright street light that shines into your window at night, or if you were walking down the sidewalk, you would have a really hard time seeing the night sky until you got a little bit further away. Both forms of light pollution mean we lose the stars, connections, and stories. Light pollution is not synonymous with outdoor light. It really only applies to outdoor light that is excessive, misdirected, or obtrusive, and an issue across mostly wealthy nations of the world. So before I get into it, I wanted to mention that if you have any questions, please add them to the chat, and there'll be some Q&A at the end as well. But if there's anything that you immediately caught your attention, please feel free to add it to the chat. So to understand how light pollution impacts parks, the National Park Service started to measure it, and that's what one of my job involves many things, but that's one of the things that I do in my job is measure night sky quality. So I take this camera out that's right here, and it will take a picture at each of these dots. You can kind of see it moving around. And we stitch those pictures together and put false color over them. And we get an image that kind of looks like this. And this is nearby my home, near Searchlight, Nevada. So you can see there's my truck in the bottom corner of the image, and there's a power line over here. So this camera is on the ground, and it took these pictures in these squares, took some pictures up here, up here, up here, and we stitched those all together. You can see an amazing Milky Way in small community. You can see the greater Las Vegas area, that's about 55 miles away. You can see Kingman, Arizona over here, about 40 miles away, and Laughlin, which is about 25 miles away. And these areas impact night sky quality in the park. So just to show you, so you understand where we are, we took that first image right there. This is a satellite image of all the light that, this particular satellite can detect from planet Earth. So we can see all of the light in this area where these kind of developed areas are. Oops, sorry. And then the next picture will be a little bit closer to Las Vegas. So you can see here, much, much brighter when you get closer to the city. But surprisingly, you can still see a number of stars out here as well. But when you go to a place like Death Valley, it has really, really pristine night skies, hardly any impacts from artificial light. But you can still see Las Vegas, which is almost 100 miles away. In the Southern California metro area, Los Angeles here is about 200 miles away. So you can still see those on the landscape. So in summary, places can take simple steps to make outdoor lighting more night sky friendly and still have lighting. And some of these simple steps really just include changing a light that would normally look like this to a light that is shielded and pointed downwards, just so it can stay on the task that you're needing it for. Warming that light up so that it's much more like firelight. Human eyes, our eyes adjusted to being around firelight, being around moonlight. This is a much warmer color, and this is what our eyes are more used to seeing, this kind of blue-white light. It has negative impacts on both humans and wildlife. We did a study in my community, just a simple one, where the community lighting facility folks dimmed 2 of the lights that we have on this road by 50% and 30%. And they were amazed, and I was sort of amazed too, that I could not tell the difference between a light that was dimmed by 50% and a full powered light. That's because those lights already had so much, they were so bright already that dimming them by 50%, you couldn't even really tell the difference. So reducing the intensity saves power and money and also improves the night sky. And changing the timing as well. Remember, if there's no people out there, it's really just not that valuable to have the light on. The light on is only necessary for people. So you can put motion sensors on things or put sensors that dim the lights at 2 o'clock in the morning when there's not going to be many people out. Shielding is the most important and most simple step. I think we're most used to seeing, these kinds of lights on streets here, and making sure those lights are shielded. and not protruding out of the fixture is helpful. Often see a lot of these kind of big lights shining out into the landscape, but if you can point those down, that is much better. And then these kind of wall packs that you often see, making sure that they point downward instead of out. That's a simple fix. So in addition to using generally too much light, we're also using light sources that are not great. So I talked a little bit about this transition from, you know, warm light that looks like firelight that, you know, we've been used to looking at until the invention of the light bulb. That's how we would use light to illuminate the nighttime environment. Over here, this is all the visible spectrum. This is what humans can see. And with the new LED lighting that we're starting to see, there's this blue bump that makes the lights appear a lot wider than they used to be. They're not this warm amber color anymore. They're kind of a blue-white color. But shielding improved in a lot of LED lighting. So we were excited to see that, but we went to a community who transitioned from these old lights to these new lights to try to see how much brighter it got. They were trying to become less bright by shielding their lights. And it turns out that whenever we went to that community and took before and after measurements, they became 50% brighter. They're working to try to reduce that now by installing dimmers on their lights. You know, the type of lighting that you use is important and will impact the quality of your night sky. There's also some ties to human well-being. The American Medical Association came out and said that lights should try to minimize the amount of total blue light that they have over here. This kind of famously was brought to the spotlight, pun intended, I guess, when LA retrofitted their lights from these old high pressure lights to these new LED lights. And, you know, there were a lot of people exposed to this kind of bright blue lighting that were not exposed before. So you can warm your lights up to improve health, but also improve wildlife habitat and the benefits of wildlife too. So maintaining these warm lights are better for night sky viewing, wildlife, and people. So now both the type of light and the amount of light we use are exacerbating the problem, but this is an important map because it gets to what, you know, I'm really talking about here. In the late 1950s in the lower 48, you can see that there were not many places on the map where you couldn't go to see the Milky Way. These kind of bright red places are the brightest spots, and the dark places and the bluish places are the darkest spots on the map. So by the 70s, it was getting much, much brighter in the east. By 1997, most of the west was still preserved and had incredible night skies. But by 2025, we started, or projections for 2025 show that we're starting to lose more and more of these beautiful natural night sky places. And we should note here that in the late 50s, to 1997, this was only a doubling of population. And so it was a much higher increase in total light in the environment during that time. But because dark places are getting harder and harder to find, many communities that do have dark skies realize what they have and are selling it. They are working to understand the resources they have and promoting their night sky while using night sky friendly lighting. So I talked a little bit about the benefits before, and I talked a little bit about what night sky friendly lighting even means. But now I'm going to talk a little bit about some of the economic benefits of a night sky. So many places are sharing their night sky resources, and they are benefiting economically. And I really believe tribal communities have an opportunity to take advantage of these economic benefits as well if they're interested. An evaluation study, this is a table of an evaluation study that looked at economic impact of astrotourism in the Colorado Plateau. So that's this area right here, this kind of dark spot. Showed that the study showed that in 10 years, $2.5 billion will be spent in the area because of astrotourism, and 11,000 jobs will be created. So astrotourism is the kind of tourism that comes when, you know, people flock to places where they can see a beautiful and pristine night sky. Because as you can see on this map, there's really just not many places you can see it anymore. And that's why many people come to NPS units, but they could also be coming to tribal lands as well. So, you know, this type of tourism is especially lucrative because these tourists often spend the night in a place, creating more revenue for the community. And the second image here shows a bill that passed in Nevada, and this bill has the intention of promoting astrotourism in the state. And we're seeing many states promote this kind of tourism because they see it as a, you know, lucrative and a possibility, you know, of expanded ecotourism opportunity. So here I have a map of the lower 48, and I do want to acknowledge our partners in Alaska and Hawaii that also have exceptional night skies that are not on this map. And I work mostly in the lower 48, and I work mostly in this Basin and Range Dark Sky Cooperative area, but I know the folks who do a lot of this work in Alaska and Hawaii that I can connect anyone with too. But this Basin and Range Dark Sky Cooperative area that you see on the map, along with the Colorado Plateau, is one of the darkest places left in the lower 48. And these two groups are communities of practice that can provide resources for tribal communities that are interested in economic development and astrotourism. So as you look on this map, if you find yourself in one of these bright places, I just also want to encourage you not to be discouraged. If someone lives in a red spot, they are happy to get to a green spot or a place where they can still see plenty of stars. One of the most popular astronomy programs of all time was the San Francisco Sidewalk Astronomers, and that was started by John Dobson. John Dobson famously showed people how to make their own telescopes without having to purchase expensive ones. So that was, and that is in a red spot. I grew up over here, and I was, in a green spot. I grew up in National Forest, and people from the big city would always come to where I live to look at the stars or the Perseid meteor shower that's coming up. So I would not be discouraged if I lived in a spot that was not one of these perfectly pristine areas in the West. So also, I just wanted to let folks know about this other group if they weren't already aware. This group is called the Native Sky Watchers. So I'm not directly a part of this group, but I do attend their webinars and just love to learn more about the information that they share. They're Native organized and a great resource, really, I think, for tribes to learn from each other. This was a webinar that they had last year that I attended. And then these are some really amazing star maps that are produced and you can purchase on the website as well. So I wanted to give you some real life examples from our partners at the International Dark Sky Association. They accredited the first dark sky nation in 2015, the Kaibab Paiute Reservation. This area is about 50 miles north of the Grand Canyon. And IDA certification, I think, has been positive for a lot of these places, parks, and also the Dark Sky Nation, the Kaibab Paiute Reservation, because it just provides some extra notoriety. People know about you and about your amazing night sky if you go through the IDA certification process. IDA shared some other tribal-led astronomy events for this presentation. So there's a campground and star parties from the Kaibab Paiute. The Dene I shared that presentation that I went to from Native Sky Watchers but they do tours of Monument Valley, and have bed and breakfast on the reservation. And then there's a Seminole group that provides tours of the Everglades as well. Some factors to consider if this is something you're interested in is, there are pandemic limitations still happening. Considering tribal safety, do you want to invite more people to tribal lands during COVID? This is one of the safest forms of tourism because time is spent outdoors. And during the pandemic, for many places that focus on ecotourism, including the National Park Service, this was one of the first kind of areas that rebounded from the height of the pandemic. So we were able to, people started coming to national parks or outdoor places first whenever they started wanting to spend some of those tourism dollars and get out of their houses. So do you want to invite people onto tribal lands at any time? Do you want to invite people, outsiders, at nighttime? Do you feel comfortable sharing your stories, some of your stories, any of them at all? Do you have facilities like private homes, hotels, restaurants that would charge fees that could stay in the community? Do you have dark skies or maybe just the darkest skies in your region, or a desire to reduce the night sky impact nearby? Some other factors to consider are there youth interested in tribal land-based jobs? Do you have a sufficient number of people seeking jobs on tribal lands or elders willing to teach night sky traditions? Is there interest in learning about other types of tools like telescopes, binoculars, other sorts of astronomical tools that you can share with the public? So for the next part of my talk, I'm going to provide some specific examples. Astrotourism is a mechanism for sustainable development. So I want to share these examples as ways of enhancing opportunities for local economic growth within tribal lands. And I share some examples here just of parks, communities, international and indigenous groups, really just to get you thinking about what others are doing and consider if any of these opportunities are right for you. So the first example I'll share is Moab Astronomy Tours. It's actually run by a former National Park Service employee. You can check out her website if you're interested, but she charges around $60 for individual tours and $600 for group tours. She offers things like constellation tours, so you don't need any specialized equipment for that, telescope tours, and moon hikes. This is another example of a tour guide. I put this one in here. This one's from Alberta, Canada, because it has a vehicle transporting people and equipment. But these kind of tour guide companies are very similar to what the National Park Service offers, but they provide this kind of on-demand programming, and they charge for the experience. They do not require significant infrastructure to be built, which can be a plus because people can start pretty quickly if it's something they're interested in. Maybe you need a vehicle for transport or for telescopes, if that's something you're interested in offering. They do require some training. Guides may need to be trained from elders about traditions or appropriate stories to share, and inappropriate stories that should not be shared. But training might also be needed for things like telescopes, if that was an aspect that a tribe was interested in providing too. The National Park Service actually holds some of these trainings for our employees, and we would be interested in piloting a program to share what we do and learn too. We just had a training at Glacier National Park, and our next training is near Austin, Texas, at the Lyndon B. Johnson National Historic Park, and that's in about 6 months. But there are many places to receive this type of training, not just with the National Park Service. One thing to add here is that, this does not need to be a standalone business for dark sky guides or astronomy tours. It can be an ecotourism business that just adds astronomy tours to their portfolio, adds full moon hikes or stargazing to something that they're already doing. Another example I wanted to provide are just places to stay. This campground called the Cosmic Campground is a place where you can park your RV or tent, and it accommodates and advertises that they have excellent night skies. People come specifically to enjoy the night sky here, and it makes this campground unique and different from other campgrounds. But it includes telescope pads. It has the night sky friendly lighting that I touched on, discussed briefly with you earlier. And it also is IDA certified. So it has this international dark sky certification that helps to just designate this location as an exceptional place to look at the night sky. Here's a hotel in Westcliff, Colorado, which is a dark sky community. And these places just accommodate and advertise the amazing night skies near their communities. This is another small hotel, the Stargazer Inn near Baker, Nevada. It's attached to a general store that caters to astronomers, sells things like star charts and tools to help astronomers if they're, these places are really rural. So it can cater by providing some of the tools that an astronomer or astrophotographer might be interested in purchasing if some of their equipment breaks down. This is a hotel that's in Scottsdale, Arizona. So those first two hotels were in really rural areas. This hotel's in a much more populated area, and you can still see that there's sky glow here. But it does have, in comparison to downtown Phoenix, it has incredible night skies, and the facility itself tries to be more night sky friendly. This hotel is called the Adero, and it offers something called a celestial suite, where you can get a telescope and put it out on your balcony. So this is a little bit different of an experience than the two that I shared with you earlier, but just provides sort of a range of things that people are doing. And this hotel doesn't specialize in, night skies, but it is a part of their package. It's a part of their portfolio and something that they share with customers. There's also food and beverage places. There's a number of breweries like Dark Sky Brewing in Flagstaff, Arizona. There's actually a number of businesses in Flagstaff, Arizona that really are a point of pride. Flagstaff, Arizona was the first dark sky community. Has about 70,000 people, maybe 80,000 by this point. If you're not familiar with that area, they are really proud of their night sky. And this is an example of how, local business supports that too and benefits from that. Another place in Torrey, Utah is this Dark Sky Coffee place. And I'm just sharing these locations also because maybe there's a whole group of people that weren't really coming to Torrey, Utah, but now they are because people know that it's an incredible night sky location. They advertise themselves as that, and the local businesses help to benefit from that as well. So this is kind of a collaborative model of night sky tourism. So this Great Basin Star Train is a historic railroad. It might be something to consider if you have anything like this nearby your tribal lands. If you have a nearby train track, historic railroad that gives tours. But basically this train goes through the basin and range. It goes from Ely, Nevada to Great Basin National Park. And it drops folks off. They look at through telescopes with a ranger or somebody qualified and to share some stories about the night sky and look at some particular night sky objects. And this train has gotten a lot of international notoriety. It's been on CBS News, a lot of media outlets, has gotten a lot of attention, and it sells out every single year. So the Northern Nevada Railroad has benefited from that for sure. But they could also work with partners in a model similar to this. This is another one to share. This one's called a Dark Sky Road Trip. It's park to park in the dark. It basically goes from one national park, Great Basin, to Death Valley. And these are both International Dark Sky Association certified parks. And it goes through the Basin and Range, which we talked a little bit about earlier, is one of the darkest places in the lower 48. This is a project that I was really involved with because, you know, as a biologist, I care a lot about the night sky. I realize and value these places and these experiences. But I think for a lot of the communities along the way that have been stewards of these places, and, you know, there's some tribal land in here too. These places are incredible. They have incredible night skies, but they need support to continue to protect them. So providing opportunities like this has been, you know, really important to me in my work. So, you know, there's some information here: best places to stargaze, best places to eat, best places to stay. So things that tourists can do that can leave money in these communities as well. So it can provide some economic benefit. And we have different places along the map, different small communities, and then of course they can get to the national parks on either side. So that's kind of a collaborative model that I think has been successful and helpful. I'm going to talk a little bit about infrastructure projects. So I'm not familiar with anything like this in the United States, but this is a project in New Zealand. And it's a fully immersive dark sky experience. It shares Maori astronomy and science. And it's a dark sky project. It was formerly known as Earth and Sky, but it's this huge facility. And it has a large telescope, but it also has things like a dark sky diner. And it's the departure point for a lot of astrotourism businesses and places that offer outdoor evening and stargazing experiences. And I just think this is a really incredible example from our friends in New Zealand. There's some other infrastructure projects that I wanted to share. So this is an example of one in Great Basin National Park. They built an amphitheater specifically for night sky viewing. We talked a little bit in the beginning of the talk how these warm lights are better than kind of the blue-white lights that we often put up. So in this amphitheater, they have a telescope over here and, you know, seats for people to listen to a presentation or to a talk. But they have red lights installed so people can still navigate here and make sure that they don't trip or fall or have any concerns like that. They can still kind of see where they're walking, but their night vision is preserved so that they can also see the stars really, really well. And then there's also an observatory called the Great Basin Observatory right outside of Great Basin National Park. They do research for the park, but they also have outside universities that run this. This observatory and telescope are actually not open to the public, but this could be something that could be open to the public in the future. And lastly, I'll share a little bit about my experience. So it was this year, my partners at the Nevada Division of Outdoor Recreation, and I applied for this Economic Development Administration Travel and Tourism grant from the American Rescue Plan Act. And that opportunity funded 2 projects from Nevada, and there was a grant in there to award Boulder City, which is my community, approximately $2 million to retrofit all the street lighting in the community to make it more night sky friendly. And our goal here is really to become night sky friendly first, and then build some of the infrastructure around that. So there are already a lot of ecotourism businesses here that support this and see this as value added to the community. And, you know, we hope to then use this as a tool to create revenue for local business. And this particular grant was chosen because they saw it as something that could be replicable, that other communities could do. And so I share this with you, and I'd be happy to share any of the language that we used in the grant opportunity too, if it's something that you would be interested in. So, here in Boulder City, they're trying to first become night sky friendly, work with businesses, and kind of expand this portfolio, because we're out right outside of Lake Mead, and that was kind of a tourism stream that they relied on for many, many years, was the lake. And now with lowering lake levels and climate change, we're trying to just add more and more types of tourism that can help benefit the community, as we're starting to see some changes in the community and the traditional tourism that we offered. So that kind of wraps up my talk for the day. I haven't looked at the chat at all. I hope there are some questions, or that we can have some discussion. I'm available to talk, or available, for send me an email if you have any questions or want to see any of the resources that I sent. I will share with Christine some of the links that I talked about today, to the cooperative that I run, to the Native Sky Watchers, some of the other information as well. And we can put that in the chat and share that with you. But I really just thank everyone for the time and letting me talk today. And I'm interested to hear questions or anything else. So thanks. And I will stop sharing my screen. Uh-oh, did I do it? Am I still sharing?
Got it squared away.
Okay, thank you.
Aloha, this is Makana. If anyone has any questions, can you use the Zoom feature to raise your hand, and we'll get to you. There's also some questions in the chat. Ashley, let's see, it says 2 million may represent a considerable capital expenditure for smaller tribes that may compete heavily with other CapEx items. Are you familiar with financing models for this type of retrofit?
So I myself am just learning more about what it costs to retrofit lights. So in Boulder City, there are almost 4,000 lights. So that's why it costs so much. In other places, without that many lights, it would not cost as much. And so it's a direct correlation for how many lights you have, how much it would cost. So I don't know where your particular community is, but it might not be $2 million is all I'm saying. And I think that you can work with lighting manufacturers to do it one step at a time. So in Boulder City, because we had this funding opportunity that came up as a part of the American Rescue Plan, we applied for these dollars to get that funding, and we were able to do it all at one time. But most communities do little bits at a time. So they don't do a full huge retrofit all in one, one at one time. So I think that's I hope that answers your question.
Thank you, Ashley. That question was from Dave Castillo. And the next question, let's see, I think this is just a comment from Marsha Kelly. This was an amazing presentation. Great job. And thank you for getting my neurons firing a million miles a second.
I know it's a lot of information. I hope it wasn't too much. And I'm happy to clarify anything too. So thank you for the compliment. I appreciate it.
It looks like we don't have any further questions right now. And there's, just so everyone notices, that there are some links being added into the chat for your reference.
And I will add, I think, Christine, should I just add a few more? Or do you want me to send them to you first? I can do it either way.
You can add them and send them.
Okay.
That way, if people want to grab them now, they can. and we can include it with follow-up materials as well.
All right. We'll just throw them in there one at a time so that it's not too much. Right. I'm going. Thank you so much, everyone.
Okay. Thank you, Ashley. Am I on mute? No. Thank you, Ashley. That was great. That's the second time I've watched it, and I think I got more out of it the second time than I did the first. Like you said, it's just so much, and it's your mind starts rolling with it. So that's great. Well, let's move into this portion where we're going to talk about what OIED has plans for mapping. First and foremost, I just want to say thank you for those that have joined, especially our tourism grantees. It has been a transition over this last year from to our new staff, and some of us are new to these kind of particular grants, or just how they're done within the BIA. So we appreciate your patience and your enthusiasm when we do communicate. I know we're kind of getting close to the end of the grant season for tourism. And again, if you have any questions, you have any concerns, please let us know. But concerning the mapping, so as you see, this is a Padlet map that was created with Tribal Tech. We loved it. We saw it and we kind of ran with it. But if Elwood, if you could kind of buzz around and put your pointer over things, and just, a live kind of demonstration of what something like this would look like. It's under the same spirit of Google Maps, where you could zoom in, you can click on things would pop up, and you can really see, per each, what you're clicking on, what's going to come up, the grantee, their contact information, what they have, a little bit of information. And while Elwood's doing that, I'll kind of tell you a little bit about what we have planned internally with OIED. Of course, federal handcuffs, we can't just load anything we feel. So as we started down this rabbit hole, we found that it goes deeper and deeper. To spare you the details, we're going to move into an ArcGIS Pro system, an enterprise license, of very few that are available within DOI, within BIA, and we've got our fingers on one of them, or a couple of them actually. So with ArcGIS, we're going to do a lot of training through the Esri system, their products and training for those that are familiar. I haven't used ArcGIS in a decade from when I was with Realty. So what I'm seeing now is just leaps and bounds for what it was then. We internally leaked up with our branch of Geospatial Services. We're going to be providing a lot of the direction. We're a guinea pig outfit of sorts within DOI. Typically, this kind of outfit would be within the Office of Trust Services. So now we're going to move in towards our own license and do a lot of our storage in a cloud system, have our own kind of dedicated portal. So there's a lot of internal details that still need to be mapped out. But between now and the fall, we're going to be doing some training, getting familiar, and then start building our data sets for those that would like to contribute and we could share, who have GIS, a program. We'd be more than happy to not reinvent the wheel and pull in a lot of what's already out there. I think moving forward, we'll be reaching out to grantees for this specifically to try to get information, from wording to additional information, phone numbers, up to date personnel. As we all know, things change overnight sometimes. So keeping that data updated, and plus internally within our own office, we do the web content management. So we should be able to push out a lot of information in real time, with updates that those that can log into our website and see if they have questions. So we do want to push that aspect, that we're going to be doing that a lot. So if you come to our website, you may look at something similar like this, where you can see a map for our particular grant, one of our 5. You could zoom into the grantees. You can see where they overlap with language. There's been some pretty good ideas that we've seen, and I'll post this in the chat. That show overlap with different language groups. We have that information shared with us, so we can rope that in. So yeah, layers upon layers is kind of what we're going to be looking at. We may have a full grantee map where you can select from a legend to see where our different grant programs overlap, look at them independently, look at regions, look at language groups that we've helped. I mean, it's really endless where we can go with this. It's just a matter of what, with communication and collaboration, what is more beneficial to be seen out there from a grantee's perspective, from a potential applicant's perspective, from just the general public in general. So that's pretty exciting. We really don't have a whole lot more than that. I was hoping to just have a quick 5 minutes, and I kind of rode through that without getting into a whole lot of more details. Does anybody have any questions or comments or suggestions for this kind of new phase with OIED? And this is just one of many. As you can kind of tell, we're growing leaps and bounds. All our grant programs have kind of exploded. We're going to be hiring new staff. There's going to be a learning curve, just like anything, but I think what feels important is we all know that in the end, we're trying to make this better. We're trying to make it more streamlined, clear, concise. We are open to any and all suggestions, from the grant side of things to, like, for instance, down this rabbit hole with mapping. Will tourism be available next year? We get kind of these questions a lot, and as you know, with our funding, with appropriate funds and how it trickles down, we may or may not have that. But Denise, if you may want to speak to that, you may save my hide a little bit.
Sure. So we anticipate announcing another funding opportunity probably in the next month or so for tourism. And so as soon as that comes out, we'd be happy to share through our economic development specialists. We'll send it out to grantees so that everybody knows that there's an opportunity to apply.
Thank you for that.
Sure.
So yeah, we will more than likely have an additional discussion with each of our grantees to see if we can share in some information so we can build our maps towards representing that particular cohort or the grant program in and of itself. I think just collecting data and being able to process it is something that we really value here. That way we can really see where we're maybe deficient or we maybe need to focus on, or where we've been too focused on. So that's where we're moving. Any other questions, concerns concerning mapping? We hope to make it as easy as possible. I have a lot more notes. We have a lot of examples of maps that we've seen, you know, across within DOI, our sister programs, within other private sector areas that, you know, we're kind of just pulling nuggets off of, and hope that we can really create a really great product and just fitting the time in and putting in the keystrokes. So look forward to that. And we're open for any suggestions, sharing opportunities, you name it, we're all about it. So we are coming up on 1:10. Do we want to go ahead and go early to the breakout?
More time to brainstorm and create, right? Creative ideas shared. Yeah.
Yeah. So the breakout room discussions, you could see on the slide that the facilitators, I'll be in room 1, Janelle will be in room 2, Jim 3, and Monica in 4. And you should be receiving links and the ability to jump into each one or jump around as you see fit. And we should instigate or implement that soon. Sorry if I put you on the spot, I would.
Yeah. So while we're waiting, I just encourage everyone, this is Christine, I encourage everyone to think about how that introduction for some of you, you may be familiar with astro-tourism, how that inspires you to think a little bit outside of the box of some things you might want to do where you live and to bring some economic development home to your community. So
should be able to press join.
So Anna, it's all yours.
Great. Let me see. I want to see how this goes. Okay. Okay. Well, thank you for this opportunity. Again, I'm Anna LeBeau, member of the Omaha Tribe of Nebraska, and the director of the Office of Indian Economic Development. And within OIED, we have our two divisions. The Division of Economic Development is who you all have been working with and who you've been getting to know and who's guiding you through your feasibility studies in this process. And then the other division is capital investment. And within the Division of Capital Investment, we operate the Indian Loan Guarantee Program. The Indian Loan Guarantee Program was created out of the Indian Finance Act of 1974, created primarily to provide access to capital. It's a tool that lenders are able to utilize to further guarantee any loans that tribal enterprises or individual natives may want to have for their loan that they're applying for their business. So we provide a guarantee up to $50 million for tribal enterprises. And then we do have a smaller loan program that we work with our community members, which is our loan insurance program. And those are typically for our individual owned businesses. And so I think that would be, I mean, personally, my opinion is for startup programs like you all, if you all are looking at going, growing and want to have some capital to provide for your program growth, then the loan insurance program could potentially support on that level as well. And that's like the loan insurance. In essence, it guarantees up to 90%, depending on the portfolio size at the insured lenders space. And our insured lenders are typically Native community development financial institutions. So if you have one in your area, it would be good to partner with them, as Native CDFIs are able to provide positive technical assistance for your organization to help you through your growth and development. Do I have control of this, or can you do the next page, please? There you go. So within our economic development program, or within your program, what you're creating, there's some things to think about. And so I have a couple of questions for you all, and you can respond, don't respond, however, but just basically food for thought is, have you all looked at, what's the bigger picture? What are your goals going to be for your program? Do you have an idea of what you want your program to look like, say in 3 years, 5 years, 10 years? I like to look at an example of, say you have a visitor center and you're wanting to have that grow. So initially it's the center where community members are able to come, or visitors are able to come and see what your community is about, but then you can add on to it and say 3 years, and you want to have, say a shop where they can come and get their little food, their snack, maybe buy a memento, maybe buy a piece of art from the community, and then go into the next stage, perhaps in 5 or 10 years, to where you have a larger facility, to where you can have your fuel station, or you can even put, a hotel, something like that, that would create additional jobs, bring more visitors to that area. And so before you do that, there's, some planning that you have to go through with respect to the strategic planning. And do you have a strategic plan in place? Sometimes we see them with our larger organizations, they may have them, but it's always good to have it specifically for your program. So you can zero in on what your goals and your objectives are for the stage of growth that you're in. You're able to determine where you want to be within your plan, and then the steps that it's going to take to get to those goals. And then another question is, have you created your organization documents? I was just in a chat and we were talking about their marketing plan and their marketing strategy. And so that's another document that you may have to get into place. How are you going to get to the community? How are you going to bring people into where you have, your program to offer? And then not to overwhelm the whole mindset of it all. And you all may be in this place already as far as, within your organizational documents. Do you have your articles of incorporation? What about policies and procedures as far as how you're going to operate the program? Even down to the point of your positions and who is going to be working within your program and what specifically are they going to be working on, and your position descriptions, which are always, necessary, especially when you're advertising to hire for positions. Another thought is, and that comes into play with respect to a contingency plan or your sustainability plan. If your director decides that they're going to move on, who's going to fill that person's place? Do you have something in place to where somebody could just jump right in and take over where they left off? Same thing with any vacant positions. So it's always good to know where, who's doing what their goals were. So then that way the program can keep moving and you can see that you can just continue to see where you're going within the future. And that also helps with funding too, because funders want to see that you have a good, strong program that is going to run hopefully without a hitch, and then they'll be willing to support you within your goals and your objectives. Next page, please. Another thought is your partnerships. Have you created partnerships within your community? And who is there to support you and your goals and the tourism industry that you're in? Have you partnered with the local chambers, perhaps the hospitality industry, the other hotels that may be in the area? They can send visitors your way. Financial institutions. I mentioned Native CDFIs. They have technical assistance to support with some of the documentation that I just described. And they could also support with respect to financing some of your program. Also community organizations. There could be partnerships, Boys and Girls Club, YMCA, you could have a youth program, perhaps an internship program to come and support with some of the duties you may have in place, to serve as tour guides, to serve as somebody that greets, the community and helps bring people in as well. And then of course our government entities, our tribal government, local and state government could also provide a good support as well. Next page, please. Then looking at other items that you may need for your program and to think about, and this is a big picture. All of these things are something that can help your program go, and it's not anything that needs to take place right now. It's just kind of your shopping list of where you're going to go in year 3, year 5. What is it you're going to need in order to continue to grow your program? And so, for example, your internet capabilities, that might be something you're going to need right away as far as being able to work within your office. And then also a good thing to keep in mind when applying for funds is the evaluation piece. Is the project that you're working on, is it something that's providing some good outcome for your community? Is it providing some good outcome from the program? Are you seeing really good positive results? If not, then, you know, perhaps you may need to tweak it. But the analysis, the evaluation that you create for the program that you're providing, it will help you define what needs to be altered within your program. And again, marketing, understanding the long term and the short term, and understanding, you know, types of strategies that you're going to utilize in order to reach your target market and be able to continue to promote your business in a good way and cost effective too, because marketing can be incredibly expensive. And then of course, you know, we have the behind the scenes things that we're going to have to work with respect to software and management, website management, and then of course, backing up our data because we want to make sure that we don't lose any of our important documents. And all of those are items that typically need funding in order to operate. Next page, please. So this is a lot of information. And again, it's not something that needs to be done like immediately, but it's things that need to be taken into consideration as you continue to grow your program. And so some potential things is to really look at your administrative and your project staff. Who are the ones that are really, you're going to need to start, you know, boots on the ground. Typically your director, typically a grant writer, somebody that's going to help manage the program itself. And then again, we mentioned succession planning. How are you going to plan for turnover? How are you going to plan if somebody decides that they want to move on to the next level within the organization? And then also think about your communication, how you're going to collaborate. How often do you want to meet with people? How often do you want to get out into the community? How are you going to maintain your inventory if you have an inventory? Again, the software and the hardware that you may need for your organization. The security itself. So I guess big picture is, again, the strategic planning pulls all of these pieces into place for your program. And it is a lot to think about, but it's really important, especially when you determine what type of organization you're going to have. If you're going to be a nonprofit organization, you're going to continue to seek funding from grant funders, and they're going to want to see a strategic plan. They're going to see that you have some pretty good ideas as far as the direction you want to go with respect to your goals and your objectives and what you're looking for within your end result. And again, the funding would support each of these pieces that go into it. And so I know that was really, really quick, and I go really fast when I start having these presentations because I get excited about the whole prospect of the big picture and where we want to go with each one of our programs, and just looking at the different applications that come in. We have, you know, some new programs, and we have some that have been working for a while, but it's amazing to see the growth and the potential that all of you carry within each one of your projects. So the next thing is having a conversation with Mr. Dave Castillo, who directs a native CDFI. And I thought it would be great to hear from him. And he's invited an additional person to come and converse with to talk about some of the ups and downs of having an organization and some things that you may have to think about it again when it comes down to your next steps.
Is that my key, Anna?
That's your key.
Okay. Hey everyone, thanks for the invitation. And your eyes are deceiving you. There are not two Dave Castillos. We're just using the same link. So I'm the real Dave Castillo, and the other Dave Castillo is Les Rubin. Les is the finance director for Picary's Pueblo, and I'll have him introduce himself. But just real quickly, yeah, I'm a CEO for Native Community Capital. We're a CDFI. Let's see, I think I could share my screen, right? Yeah, try to do this. All right, just so you have some background on me. Native Community Capital, or Native CFI, and we're based out of Laguna Pueblo in New Mexico. For the folks from San Felipe, we do work with your housing authority there on some housing and other pueblos as well. We have offices in Arizona as well. So that's us down there, and that's kind of the landscape that we serve. Not all CDFIs are the same. I know Citizen Potawatomi has a CDFI. Jamestown Sklallam has one. Of course, there's Alaska Growth Capital that received an allocation of new market tax credits. Chickasaw had an allocation at one point, and there are others. So I think my main, we're going to have a little bit of a discussion here with Les. But what I like to do in these types of settings is kind of give you economic development directors and others that are responsible for these types of projects some maybe ways to discuss the projects with your tribal councils or economic development boards or others that are making decisions, because you've got a feasibility plan now. But now the question is, does it go before tribal council, and what are you requesting from tribal council to move forward? And certainly we've all been in those discussions, and I hope that as we kind of go through this presentation, you get some additional insight on maybe some ways to position that. We finance things on the smaller side. We do gap financing and bridge loans for the types of projects that you do. So we or other CDFIs may not be the best source, but we can be part of that discussion. One thing I wanted to mention that might be helpful as you discuss these projects with your tribal council or others is how we typically look at projects in Indian country. I think in Indian country, we've gotten really good at using grant funds. And that's fine. But I think as we go into economic development or hospitality or tourism-based ventures, that's not going to meet the entire need. It hardly meets the entire need for any of the projects that we do, right? But specifically with regard to economic development and tourism, certainly other funds are necessary and other funds are available. But when it comes to grant funds, I think when you talk with tribal councils, what they're familiar with a lot of times is the free technical assistance that comes with that. So if you get sideways with your federal program officer, what happens? Well, they come out, do a visit, they try to assess why the funds aren't being spent as they should, and they provide you some technical assistance to get back on track, whether that's reporting or actual expenditures. And typically when we're talking about these types of dollars, of course, the source of the funds are taxpayer dollars, right? And the purpose are government, social, and environmental impacts typically. And the success metric is whether or not we've used the funds as they're intended per the grant guidelines. And to be able to do that, we get some community input. We develop a needs assessment, we develop a master strategic or implementation plans, and we got to have a good grant history, right? Because if you didn't spend the money that you got the previous round the right way, you're not going to get additional grant funds. And so this process, I think, is well known. And I think tribes that really do well in terms of securing especially competitive grant funds like the ICDBG or other competitive dollars that are still grant funds but are competitive, have this process down. What a lot of times, our tribal leadership who are well versed in a lot of things, but must be well versed in more things than is, I think, fair, is this part of it. Once we've used the grant dollars, especially for economic development, we typically need some private financing. And of course, I mean private funds, bank dollars or other funds that are not grant funds. And the purpose should be for a business activity where the success metric is return on investment and essentially repayment if it's debt, right? So this is much different from the grant funding that does not get repaid, and that's the big difference, right? These are loan funds. And there isn't free technical assistance a lot of the times, but sometimes there is, as you're getting here from DOI. But a lot of times you need paid technical assistance, contractors, consultants, and others to do what's necessary to secure the debt financing, those private funds, which includes a business plan, financial statements, as well as some equity and collateral. And this is a lot of times where you lose tribal council members, is kind of, you lost me at leverage, you lost me at equity. What do we mean by that? And why do we need that? So really the key here is to be able to combine these two activities so that we can blend the grant funds that we know are available with the debt financing that could be available if your feasibility plan in fact shows that it's a project that should move forward. And so an example of leverage, which I think a lot of times is not discussed because we focus on the grant dollars, is a project that we did with Pickery's Pueblo some years ago. And it was for this net zero energy fire station. And it's a beautifully designed building. It's very functional. Before the Pueblo had this building, they're up in the Sangre de Cristo Mountains. This fire engine right here could only be filled with water half the year, because during the winter, the water would freeze, it would expand, and it would bust the truck. So half the year, they effectively did not have fire suppression services for their community. So they needed this building, again, which has solar and net zero energy, and it's got all kinds of tremendous features. And so they did use a significant amount of grants. And I think this is where this is really attractive to outside investors, funders, banks, or who have you, because again, tribes are so good at using grant dollars. So they had these ICDBG grant dollars, which were competitive and were awarded. They were able to commit some tribal funds. And then we did a bridge loan that was taken out with USDA direct loan dollars. But as you can see here, as beautiful as the building is, a really beautiful part of it is this, what's called the capital stack, right? The total cost of construction was $883,000. We leveraged these grant dollars to be able to secure this loan. And so really this represents about 20% of the total cost, and the grant dollars covered 80%. From an investor perspective, from a bank perspective, this is fantastic because it reduces the risk to the bank. Sorry. So it reduces the risk to the bank, and typically it's flipped. Typically a bank is financing 80% of a project and you're coming in with 20%. But the fact that there are grant funds available, whether those are stimulus dollars, whether those are unrestricted dollars that the tribe has, the fact that you can go to an investor or bank and say, look, we've got most of this covered, we just need a small piece of it. This goes over really well. But beyond that, before we get there, we have to be able to have a discussion with tribal council to explain why this is a good idea, why it's a good idea to borrow funds and expose ourselves to what these financial institutions, whether they be investors, banks, even CDFIs, what does that mean? What kind of risk exposure do we have? Does this mean that if we default on this loan, that this bank is going to come over and take over, a building on our land? Limited waivers of sovereign immunity. There's all kinds of discussions here. If we do new market tax credits, that's a complex structure that has a number of partnerships that need to be understood. So I wanted to bring Les in on the conversation because even though we're a lender, and even though we're talking about tourism, it could be a fire station, it could be a C-store, it could be a campground, it could be, some kind of, dark sky, stargazing type enterprise that's connected to something else you're doing. The fundamentals remain the same from the financing side of it, which means that the project needs to make sense on paper in terms of how the dollars are going to flow, how the costs are going to get covered, and how the debt, if you use debt, is going to be retired. And again, we're starting to use a lot of jargon, right, in terms of debt financing, equity. new market tax credit equity, leverage, capital stack, and I think it's easy to lose council members along the way who need to make critical decisions on moving forward. So Les, can I ask you to introduce yourself, and then we'll get into a little bit of discussion on the process of moving from a feasibility study to actually getting the dollars put together to get the project up and running. Les, are you there?
Yes. Can you
Yep, I can hear
me?
you.
Yes. Hi, I'm Les Rubin. I'm the finance director for Picaris Pueblo. I've been the finance director for the past 5 years. When I first came, we looked at what Dave is talking about. The primary resources for the tribe was really grant funds, and they had an extremely very small amount of economic development activity. So I'd like to speak to what occurred and sort of how we moved to have more economic development opportunity. The first thing I want to mention is actually something that happened 30 years ago. 30 years ago, the tribe was reached out to by a minority group that wanted to open up a hotel in downtown Santa Fe. But because the tribes were, in those years, this is the early 90s, were involved in gaming, primarily in New Mexico, that was the economic development engine, and they were just starting gaming. There was very few tribes that were not in gaming, and it just so happened Picaris, being the smallest tribe and least resourced, was approached because BIA had just opened their loan, which was the 90% loan. If you're not familiar with that, basically BIA will commit to secure 90% of a loan, and the risk is only 10%. And that's extremely favorable to the lending institutions because they have very little risk. So the tribe was reached out because these loans, you have to have a tribe to have at least 51% of the ownership. So what I want to share with you after 30 years is Hotel Santa Fe is the Native American hotel in downtown in Santa Fe. And it's been very successful, but it's been very driven by the minority ownership in regards to management. We're right now at a place, only a few months from now, that we're going to get another guaranteed loan that will have the tribe go from 51% to 100% of the ownership. So when you look at these loan guarantee programs, realize the tribe does not have to be 100% from day one, but you can grow into a position where you can go from a 51% share to a larger share over time. And that's what Picaris did, and took advantage of that story with those owners. In regards to additional resources, one of the things I want to share with the group is you're probably quite aware of tribal shares. And the tribal shares formula is predominantly a population-based formula. So if there's a certain amount of resources by, as an example, BIA in a region, they're going to proportionately share that based on the population of the various tribes in the area. And that seems reasonable, but for Picaris, as the smallest tribe, which felt not unfair, and the tribal council has expressed this, is the fact that they don't look at non-federal resources. So if you have a tribe that has significant revenue stream for gaming in their casino, that's not included, and they get, if they're 10 times the size of Picaris, if Picaris is 300 people, they'll get 10 times the amount of tribal shares. So it puts a great onus on the tribe to have economic development resources. So the tribe intentionally went after a strategy in regards to how can they have additional economic development projects. And I want to mention a few of them to you. But I want to mention something before I go into the various economic development opportunities, and you'll see where this segues. The tribe, because of its smallness, got involved in the roundhouse, the capital. In New Mexico, we have a 30 and a 60-day session. And Picarise has been very active in those sessions to talk about opportunities. And as is known by other tribes in New Mexico, there is an association and group within all the tribes of tax administrators. And the reason why that's very key, if you don't have that in other areas, but just I want to emphasize, is it's very important to have tax advantages. So for instance, the first project I want to talk about is our new travel center. Our new travel center, we have the opportunity to collect our gross receipts tax, our sales tax, and under the tax authority of the Pueblo, we can capture all of that sales tax, and it does not go to the state, just a small percentage. In addition, in regards to selling gas, in New Mexico, we can keep the 17 cents for every gallon of regular gas is sold. The tribe keeps it, and it doesn't go to the state. In addition, the cigarette tax is also another tax. So when we did our feasibility study for the travel center, the taxes alone covered the sustainability and the self-sufficiency of this. So I want to emphasize that the tribes should get involved in issues around taxes, because that creates a great advantage. And the place for that, of course, is in your legislative process, so that you get those kind of advantages. We've opened up a travel center. When we opened up a travel center, we're an isolated area. We're an hour outside, north of Santa Fe in the mountains. We're at 7,300. And we had the highest gas prices in the state, because there was only mom and pop gas stations, 1 or 2 pumps. And when we opened up the travel center in January, we were literally 38 cents cheaper on regular gas than our competitors. And now we're getting the bulk of all of the gas sales, and we're in a recreation area. And unfortunately, this year we had that major fire, but we're hopeful in the next few years, as the recreation comes back, we'll be able to get that spring and summer business. Besides being a travel center, and we don't call it a convenience store, because we've also made the case to Subway to not, and we have no fast foods or no accessible foods in an area that is villages of 5,000 people. And we were able to get a Subway and a drive-through Subway. And we made the case of, you don't have to have a large population if there's not a lot of competition. And we made that case, and we got the Subway approved, and that will open in the next few weeks. In addition, we cut a deal with the Dixon Food Co-op, which is 11 miles away, and we're going to have fresh groceries and produce, etc. And we're basically a food desert, and we don't have healthy food. Everybody bulk shops an hour away in Taos or Española or Santa Fe, so that's another big plus. So again, we chewed this meal with the tribal council in small quantities. By the way, this travel center was another 90% guaranteed loan. And it was done through Pinnacle Bank in Iowa, which is a native owned lending institution. The second area is the fact that the great amount of cost for our households and for the tribe was electricity. And when we thought about economic development opportunities, we knew we needed to have less expensive electricity. Picarise, even though we're the smallest tribe and least resourced, we put in the first 1 megawatt, 4,000 panel solar array 3 years ago, and we've just been funded for a second one. And I want to speak to that just as lessons learned. First of all, success breeds success. We got another Department of Energy grant because the first one was successful. And that was extremely important. And one of the things we did was we then went after the matching funds, and we had an opportunity to show that if we got a greater amount of matching funds, that it would be less of an expense on our households and our population. We were able to get that, and we only had a small amount, $450,000 worth of matching funds that we need to come up with, because the first solar array, we had to take a commercial loan. But I want to mention this leveraging that Dave mentions, and the 450,000 versus 1.9 million, the whole project was 2.3. That sounds like a good deal in regards to having limited match. But what we found is when we're successful, we can then go out to foundations and the Wells Fargo Bank and ask, can they participate in the match? Because this, with a full success and showing that the vast majority of it was grant funds, it's a limited amount asking for third parties and foundations. So if you can't get a commercial loan or borrow, we've made the case that we can get, we'd like to get funds from foundations. And we've now been fully funded on our project. So that's the best numbers you can have, is regards to the fact that we don't have to pay back money right now. We'll have to have money for utility and all of that. And also, the other thing I want to share with you about our solar is that the tribe was purposeful in regards to being a place of a showcase and demonstration, and brought in other tribes to see what we're doing. And the reason for that was not just peer experience with other tribes to see what we're doing, but also foundations and others want to fund organizations, agencies, tribes that will showcase what they're doing. And they see that as an education and a multiplier effect. So that was another whole piece that we did. On the tourism side, New Mexico is a very big tourism state. There's a project called Main Street, and what they do in a local small towns is they allow you to have a map and sort of a pictorial self-guided walk that they do in the small little towns. So Picarise has reached out to do the same kind of self-guided tour for tourism to come in, and we're now finishing up a renovated museum that we're going to have. So there's a lot of pieces to this, and the tribe is always open to share what's going on and to understand that this is a big impact for the tribe because of minimal resources.
Yeah, thanks, Les. I got to tell you, when we're approached by a tribe for financing or doing some bridge loans, having someone like Les at the tribe is a dream come true, right? Because they understand kind of what's at stake, what the risk is, and they can really facilitate the discussion between what we need as a lender and what the tribe needs from a governance standpoint. So I got a couple of questions for you, Les. You make it sound so easy. The fact is, Les is humble. He didn't tell you he's got tremendous amount of international experience on these very same topics. And it's just a dynamo. But Anna talked about partnerships, talked about strategic planning. When you talk with me, you pick up the phone and you have a very compelling case for why I should make funds available. And so I think that's a big part of it, having your numbers together, having your argument together. But then when you go back to tribal council, what works well in terms of, I think you talked about kind of, small bites, but what works well in terms of working with tribal council members and even tribal community members around moving forward with some of these projects?
I think first, obviously, you have to come up with the business case and the business plan, because they're going to ask what's at risk. What do we have to risk? And I think that that needs to be focused in on in regards to understanding all of that. The outreach to the community for the tribe wants to always assess not just the risk, but whether or not there's competition. Like our travel center, we have no competition. And so I want to speak to that just for a second. When these economic development projects are looked at, and they're looked at whether or not they will succeed or fail, the real focus to the tribal council is, if you build it, they will come. But if you build it, will the restrooms be clean? Will the staff be able to take care? In other words, will we be able to execute operationally what we said? In other words, we have the blessing of not having competition at that level, but can we sustain the project? Can we sustain the business? And the tribe is so small, we're also reliant on non-natives in the various villages and communities. So that's a focus on finding the right people to be operational. In other words, yes, it's a challenge to get the project off the ground or to fund it, but we need to make a case that we're going to be operational. And that's also what we need individuals and tribal council members or assigned directors to be the focus and stakeholder for that particular project. So we have that for solar, we have that for the travel center, et cetera. So, that's, but we don't go over people's heads in regards to that of what they can understand or not. We take our time, we ask questions, we repeat that. We don't have just one meeting, we'll have follow-up meetings. It's important. It's the tribe's economic development project. It's not an outsider, it's not, and that I think is part of the key.
Oh, that's great. I mean, I think on 2 points. One, operationally, I won't name the tribes, but there's 2 tribes that are next to each other. And if you go to one hotel for one tribe, it's you get what you pay for. And if you go on the other street, it's beautiful and it's managed really well. And I think what the director of that economic development department said is, we may not have the talent right now to run the hotel the way tourists from China and all over the world are going to expect, but we can get there. So they put a 3-year management plan in place where the management company that they hired would train their tribal members to take over management after 3 years. And that was an operational thing because they didn't want it looking like the hotel across the street from the other tribe. I think the other thing you mentioned was having a champion. I think we've talked on a number of we've talked on a number of occasions, and I remember asking one time, well, what happened to that project? Where is that at? And I think your comment was like, that one's on hold, meaning we've had the conversation at council, there's a little bit of a hiccup, but guess what, we're moving on to the next one. So I think one of the things that you do really well is being able to have a number of different opportunities lined up, and as you're working on them, being able to move on the ones that are possible when they're possible. So that leads to my second question. And I think
Dave, can I interrupt just while it's fresh in my mind? The previous presenter talked about strategic planning. And one of the things about strategic planning is that from a budgetary standpoint, that the tribe, if they feel like it's in the wheelhouse and this is an important economic development project, to budget for a champion, a person who would be the focal point for that project, and budget that right from the get-go if they feel that that's the case. And I want to give just a clear example that everybody will understand on this call. When we make our presentation as the tribe that has the most solar, we ask the tribes that have a casino that spend $750,000 and more on electricity, why they haven't created a solar grid and why they haven't had a solar array, because they're paying this out to the utility company. Our second solar array will be around 5 cents to 6 cents a kilowatt. If you go up in the utility line, it's 18 cents a kilowatt that's regulated. Will be 1/3 less, 1/3 of the total price of electricity. All of these tribes that have gaming and casinos, they are spending all of this money that they could recoup with a solar array over a period of time. So the question is why? And I'm, as again, an outsider, this is my belief. When gaming started, initially, Native Americans did not have the expertise in regards to gaming, and they outsourced it to management that were outsiders of gaming. Over the period of time now, almost every tribe has their own management of gaming. They do some outsourcing, but they control the gaming story. And why? Because there was a gestation period of learning about that story. And so solar, even though it's rational and we make the case and we show them the dollars, the reason why it's not absorbed by many of the tribal councils is they don't have a champion and somebody who's educating the tribal council about this project, because the numbers speak for themselves, but there's not somebody that's sitting inside the tribe that can continuously articulate and educate the tribe on why they should get involved in solar, as an example. And I think that's the point I wanted to make, is that if you feel that this is going to be a good project and it makes sense, but you need a gestation period of a year or so to get it running, then put it in your budget to fund somebody who can drive that project.
Yeah, thanks, Les. I mean, I hope everyone is encouraged here. I mean, Picary's Pueblo is the smallest, most remote tribal community in New Mexico, and and it doesn't have a gaming enterprise, and yet they've done a tremendous amount with what they do have. So I hope that's encouraging to you. And this idea of champions, right? These things don't get built by themselves. Someone needs to drive them. Someone needs to help develop that. I have one last question. I know we're running short on time here, but let me turn to look the other way in terms of investors, partners, federal agency folks, and others. It seems when we talk with outsiders, they can think of a million reasons why not to make a commitment to a project in a particular tribal community. A lot of times it has to do, as a banker told me years and years ago, why would I go through the brain damage of figuring out how to do a deal in Indian country when I could get what I need from my bank regulator by doing a deal with Hispanics or Blacks, right? And he wasn't trying to be mean about it. He was just saying, like, from a business standpoint, that seems like a lot of work. And we got tons of projects in East LA or Southside Chicago, and I'd rather go there because I understand that space and I know the people. What have you found is the best approach to working with outsiders who have resources, whether that's technical expertise, partnership opportunities, or investment dollars, but who are maybe a little lukewarm to working with a small tribe in the Sangre de Cristo Mountains?
I think the fast answer is if you can do it, which we worked hard, is that you create a case where they actually have instead of seeing the tribe as a higher risk group, it's actually the least risk group. And I'm going to give an example. Picary's, it's 4 or 5 years straight in the legislative process. Picary's a month ago was the first tribe to have an intertribal government agreement with the state of New Mexico for cannabis. And in cannabis, the law, in the recreation law that was passed last March, the state for retail operations, et cetera, goes from 12 to 18, over time, 12 to 18% excise tax. The agreement that we have, the tribe keeps the entire 12 to 18% excise tax over time and doesn't even have to match it like in the state of Washington. We can compete, so we can be at a less expensive cost to the consumer in regards to cannabis. And that we try to create an argument that basically will have an advantage and a strong business story. And I think that's what we try to craft as we can. And when we have problems, we wind up buying a piece of property in Santa Fe to put a dispensary. But the bottom line is that we don't want to ask or beg. We want to create a strong argument where it's hard for them to resist funding us.
Well, and I think everyone on this call should know Les can be a real bulldog. You know, I mean, it's one thing to be able to kind of converse with tribal council members and provide information in a way that's useful and helpful and get their support. But when, you know, he's challenged by someone who should do the right thing and work with the tribe, he can go at it, you know, in an aggressive, but business-like way. And that really, really helps. So Les, thanks for all you do. Thanks for this conversation here. I'll turn it back over to Anna, and if there's some questions, I'm sure you may have many for Les. I'll turn it back over to our facilitator. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Dave and Ron. I just really appreciate your time and your experience that you're sharing with the community, with our tourism grantees. Because there is a lot to think about with respect to planning and where you want to go in the next stages. I appreciate the thought on sustainability and how you want to continue to grow your organization or your program, and how you can turn it into something bigger, and then, you know, continue to make additional, hopefully for-profit entities. I think that is it. Who do I turn it over to next to?
Hey, Anna, I'll just take over a little bit in the Q&A. There's not a whole lot in the way of questions, but definitely some feedback that I'll share that was coming up in the chat. So Stacy shared out that in a meeting with our tribal leaders, it was brought up that you can find funds to build a building, but where's the help with our operations and management? Our tribes need assistance with this for operations and management capacity, or training and technical assistance for training on operations and management capacity. And then Anne also shared that she would like more conversations like this. One problem for EDP is they do not have other practitioners to talk to. It would be really great to have a group to talk to with no questions that are too dumb, to get some qualified, good answers. We need mentors of experts. Let's see. Allison is saying, agreed, Anne and Stacy have made good points in the chat. Also, we are a very small tribe in rural Northern California, and we have a solar microgrid. We are open to sharing information on how to get this done. Thank you, Allison. Yeah, it doesn't look like there's any questions here. Thank you to our panelists for your presentation.
Just want to mention one thing, you know, the intertribal organizations, if you're in the Northwest, affiliated tribes, Northwest Indians and ATNI EDC, we'll have a new director soon that comes from kind of this, you know, financing kind of side of things. I know Southern California Tribal Charities Association has focused a lot in recent years on telecom, so I think they've got good capacity there. All Pueblo Council of Governors in New Mexico have quite a bit of economic development experience in the APGC area. So, you know, they're out there, NAFOA and others. I would push those organizations to kind of really, in addition to looking at all the important issues like ICWA and water rights and everything that tribal councils deal with, to put some time, commit some resources, find some people, you know, to help provide that technical assistance at that regional level through the intertribal council, intertribal organizations. I think they're a great resource and could be doing a lot more in this space. Historically, they focus on social service type issues, but you know, this is something that I think as time has come, and CDFIs are here as a resource for you as well. NAFOA, I hope I didn't I didn't mean to not state them, but they're a great organization as well. So thanks again for the opportunity.
Thank you, Dave. God, really appreciate it. I took so much notes on that. I think that was such quality with what was presented. I really appreciate that, for just to expand my knowledge as well to what we can offer to the grantees. And to go on the other side of that, I'd like to introduce next the our economic development specialists, Ms. Janelle Green and Mr. Jim Henry. They've been beneficial helping us, and hopefully I've reciprocated in some way. So I'll turn it over to them. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Dennis. Hope everybody can hear me. Looks like my mic's on. So my name is Jim Henry, and I'm an economic development specialist along with Janelle Green. And we're fairly new to the agency. I think we're coming up on our 1 year soon. But as we have been on this adventure, we've found that there's not a lot of consolidated resources for tribes and tribal tourism. So we have developed this, it's a short list, but it is a list of resources that tribes can look at to further their tourism adventure. So we're going to go through a brief PowerPoint presentation. We're going to give an overview of a few of the opportunities and then open it up for questions. And we don't have a lot of time, so I will turn it over to Janelle. Janelle? You're on mute.
Thank you,
There
Jim.
you go.
Thank you, Jim. And hello to all of you. Next slide, please. So as Jim alluded, our presentation is going to consist of a brief overview of the Division of Economic Development where we are based. We're then going to discuss the federal resources for tourism development that Jim mentioned. We'll highlight the process for sharing your future success stories, and then we'll respond to any questions not yet answered in the chat box. Next slide, please. So the Division of Economic Development within OIED supports the economic development of American Indian and Alaska Native communities through grant opportunities and also by providing technical assistance to federally recognized AIAN tribes. Next slide, please. So the Economic Development Specialist team conducts outreach on OIED grant programs to tribes, tribal organizations, and federal partners. And we're a team of 3. So we report to Denise Litz, our division chief. As you can see within this map, so I cover the Southwest, Hawaii, and Alaska in that dark orange color, while Jim is in charge of the Northwest zone colored in green. And as was mentioned earlier by Denise, that eastern zone is in the process of being filled. Next slide, please. So it looks like this slide is a little darkened. So we're going to now discuss the federal resources for tribal tourism implementation. Sorry that this is a little difficult to read. As Anna mentioned, the Division of Capital Investment supports access to capital through the Indian Loan Guarantee and Insurance Program. Jim is now going to discuss the resources through the Division of Economic Development that could apply to your tourism implementation projects. And then we're going to both discuss other federal programs that could support tribal implementation or tribal tourism implementation. Thank you, Jim.
Okay, next slide, please. Okay, so we are going to notice our slides are a little messed up because I don't think one of the features are alive that actually blends these slides. So that's why you're seeing this little picture over the text here. But as indicated, we have a short time, so I'll go through this fairly quick. One of the programs that you may have heard of is the Living Language Grant Program. And this provides funds to deliver native language instruction, immersion programs, building tribal capacity to create and expand and preserve language programs. For example, it covers native language signage, events to align with program objectives. And during this last go around, we had awards ranging from approximately $59,000 to $200,000. Next slide, please. Another one of our programs is the National Tribal Broadband Grants. And these funds are used to hire qualified consultants to do research on potential development or expansion of high-speed internet. Some examples of eligible activities would be estimates of cost of building or expanding broadband networks, identifying potential funding or financing, assessment of your current broadband services. And our last awards were in 2020, and we will be announcing soon funding opportunities for 2022. Next slide, please. One thing that's new this year is technical assistance pilot program. As we've learned over the last 12 months, number one, we really didn't have technical assistance to provide. So we actually entered into a contract with Tribal Tech, who will be operating this pilot program and conducting virtual training on our grant program pre-applications. So if you're having questions about a current funding source, you need technical assistance, you're going to be able to reach out to them and they can provide assistance for you. Also developing business plans and grant writing in general. They do have a website, and here's the link below where you can actually see upcoming events and request technical assistance. Next slide, please. So now we're going to cover briefly a few examples of items that we've included in our resource tool. The tool is for tribes and tribal organizations. The tool identifies other federal resources that support tribal tourism. There's some free services such as counseling, business infrastructure to grants, loans, etc. We also have in this tool the website links for all these resources where you can actually go and explore and look at the eligibility requirements, the application requirements. So the first one is going to be covered by Janelle, and I'll turn it over to Janelle.
Thank you, Jim. So there is transportation infrastructure funding available through the Department of Transportation's Nationally Significant Federal Lands and Tribal Projects Program. So that program funds the construction, reconstruction, and rehabilitation of nationally significant transportation facilities on either federal or tribal lands. The project can be a highway, a road, a bridge, trail, or transit system that is located or provides access to tribal land. It doesn't cover design.
All right, excellent. The other one that we wanted to touch base on is the Administration for Native American SEDS programs, and this is under Health and Human Services. And they have a number of social and economic development strategies programs, both for the lower 48 and also for the state of Alaska. And their priority currently is funding those programs that focus on economic development. Their funding has currently closed for the year, but it will be opening up shortly in the new fiscal year. And they do a mass distribution, so look for those funding announcements. Janelle?
Thanks, Jim. So there's also funding for tribal heritage preservation through the National Park Service's Tribal Heritage Grant. It funds a range of different historic preservation and community projects, including oral history and documenting cultural traditions, as well as cultural and historic preservation, interpretation, and education.
Great. And the other one that we wanted to touch base with you is really the U.S. International Trade Administration and the Office of Indian Economic Development Native Act grantees. And a lot of people don't know about their services, but a lot of their services deal with providing a range of data related products that support international outreach and promote efforts of U.S. destination and traction. And as we've heard on different statistics and reports, newspapers, that there are a lot of foreign international travel to native lands. So they're able to provide assistance with that and promote that. They're also able to provide technical assistance like business counseling. They have programs that match funding, promotional support to help U.S. destinations, etc. Also within that, they have the Office of Native American Business Development, and they serve as a facilitator by assisting and consulting throughout Indian country, leveraging efforts of different federal programs with tribal governments, private sector business, etc., and financing in order to promote economic growth for tribes in Indian country. Next slide, please. And I believe we have a link in the chat if you don't recall receiving it in the email. And again, we update these as changes take place. The other thing that we want to touch base with everybody is we want to stay in touch. We know as Native people, we're storytellers, and we want to hear your story about your adventure. You know, you applied for fundings, the tribal tourism funding, you've been able to work on your feasibility studies, you know, what's the next step? A good example of a success story that we've been sharing is with the Heidelberg Corporation, where they actually applied for a feasibility study. They was awarded the funds. The study was conducted, and it was for a cafe laundromat. And with that feasibility study, they was then able to go to HUD and obtain funds to actually build their site. And now they're open, they have the restaurant going, the laundromat is working great. So from that small $30,000, they're able to tell their story of how they was being able to use those funds and actually get to the end and open their business. So again, please stay in touch with us. You can share your stories with Janelle or myself. So we can eventually have a site on our website where we'll actually share these success stories so that other Natives can hear of your adventure and they say, okay, we might try this adventure and open that door and take the first steps. Next slide, please. All right, thank you. I've never talked so fast in 15 minutes to get a point across. So we just want to say thank you. And here's our contact information for our grants management, Mr. Dennis Wilson and Monica Walker. Next slide, please. And I know we're like at our time, but if there's any quick questions, drop it in the chat, or you can always email Janelle or I.
Okay, well, thank you, folks. I appreciate that. I saw that you dropped some more additional resources in the chat. That's great. Please click on those and save them. I'm not sure if we get access to the chat after today. So we are getting ready to wind down, close down day one, and it was great. If I could speak for everybody. Denise, would you have any closing remarks? Or Anna?
I'd be happy to, Dennis. I just want to thank everyone for joining us today. I think this has been a great opportunity for us to connect. We have tomorrow to look forward to as well. I hope that these presentations and the exchange of information has been helpful, and we will look forward to seeing everyone tomorrow. Thank you and have a great evening.
Also, one last thing.
Sure.
We're going to have a survey here pretty quick, so please provide your comments. We really do value those. Appreciate it. And there we go.